This video got long because it covers a lot of different ground. I wanted to detail and show rather than tell about actual practice to go beyond a scholarly treatment of an 8th century Buddhist grimoire. Then, through those details, show technique. What can we learn from doctrinal tradition on use of mantras, mudras, and ritual implements in magical spells invoking the Wrath King? Is there something here that suggests that actually initiatory lineage under a guru or a master isn't necessary? It's one way, for sure, and unquestionably the dominant view, but I'm making the case, backed up by authoritative canon, that it isn't the only way. What can a practitioner today learn from this history? What does a practitioner need to know about mandalas? What kernels of praxis might you be able to pull inspiration from as you learn about these millennia old magical spells? And of course, there are timestamps if you want to skip around. Per usual, the video is only half of the information provided. Be sure to check out the companion write-up for the complete download. The initial purpose for this video was to introduce the esoteric Buddhist rites and rituals associated with Yamantaka, the Wrath of Wisdom. But then, incidentally, an introduction to Yamantaka is also a great way to introduce Buddhist magic and have that conversation on the mainstream religious contemplative practice and philosophy of Buddhism versus the occult and mystical practices of Buddhism. Zong translates as the secret school or esoteric and tantric Buddhism. It's in this tradition under the umbrella of Buddhism that we find practices that we might call Buddhist magic, like the rites of Yamantaka. It's essentially the mystical stream within Buddhism. Just for helpful comparison, I liken it to Kabbalah within Judaism, Christian mysticism versus Orthodox or mainstream movements of Christianity, Sufism and Islam, or even Taoist mysticism under the broader spectrum of Taoism. These are schools within the religious traditions that focus on direct experience of the divine, often designed with ritualistic techniques for achieving that direct experience of the divine. And there's going to be this uncomfortable, quiet tension between the mystical offshoot of what's otherwise institutionalized. So, in this video, we're going to focus on learning about Yamantaka, the Wrath of Wisdom. Nemesis to Yama, the king of hell and god of death. We'll look at medieval Buddhist texts that read like grimoires and understand for ourselves how Zong, the secret school and mystical Buddhism, differs from contemplative Buddhism. This lecture is going to build on our previous coverage of Kuan Yin, Guanzhiying Pusa, Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of mercy and compassion. Yamantaka consciousness is embodying the paradox: what does compassion look like when compassion fails? Manjushri Wenshu Pusa is the Bodhisattva of wisdom in our universe, but a Buddha in eons and worlds beyond ours. Yamantaka is an emanation of Manjushri. Yamantaka fully embodies all that Manjushri signifies, just a different side of divine wisdom. Manjushri as the Bodhisattva Buddha of peaceful, transcendent wisdom, and Yamantaka as a manifestation of Manjushri in the form of wrathful, justice-seeking wisdom. In religious paintings of Yamantaka, you'll often find Manjushri either above Yamantaka's head or in his crown. Another common depiction is Yamantaka with his consort, Vajravatali, a wisdom dakini, the diamond ghoul, who resurrects the dead and saves and heals those who have been oppressed. Dawei De Ming Wang, or Yamantaka, is described as a Benzun per esoteric Buddhist doctrine. In Tibetan Buddhism, this is a Yidam, a particular chosen form of awakened consciousness, in this case a chosen form of wisdom, manifested through meditation and invocation rites with a named deity. So just to clarify, in this video I'm going to be focusing on the Mahayana perspective. Yamantaka is a supreme power whose core function is to counteract oppression, defeat or overcome fear, and achieve mastery over oppressive cycles such as death and samsara. You'll often see him depicted holding a skull cup that's filled with blood and organs because he eats death. Likewise, he's depicted with a weaponized Dharma wheel to show how he destroys or defeats samsara. Dawei the Mingwang is a liberator, and so other weapons he's associated with are the trident, Manjushri's sword, and a kartika, a crescent-shaped flaying knife for cutting through obstacles and clearing your path. I call Yamantaka the enough is enough tantra. It's what you weave into the fabric of the cosmos when you've tried everything else. It's now time for the oppressor, the perpetrator, to be punished. If Kuan Yin can placate malefic spirits with her gentle compassion and her power to soothe suffering, then Yamantaka is blunt force. He subdues malefic spirits with justified, wrathful power. Basically, Kuan Yin gives when they go low, we go high. Yamantaka gives when they go low, we go straight to hell to force push them up to higher ground. For the scriptural and doctrinal origins of Yamantaka practice, the primary source is the Vajrabhairava Tantra, regarded as the definitive series of texts on Yamantaka. That text can be transgressive. Just to give some examples for what I mean by that, to cast the mandala, you anoint yourself with the ashes of a cremated corpse, and the mandala is to be drawn at midnight. The text we'll be talking about makes reference to a lamp offering. In the Vajrabhairava Tantra, you light the lamp with human fat. For the food offerings, you use the 5 organs: liver, heart, stomach or spleen, lungs or intestines, and kidney. And it's unclear whether by that we mean human organs or just animal organs. And that's just the PG-13 stuff. In contemporary Tantric Buddhist devotional practices with Yamantaka, you may have heard of the solitary hero sadhana, which isn't so much canon per se as it is a system of Yidam practice from the 14th and 15th centuries that evolved over time from the Vajrabhairava Tantra and the text we're going to be talking about and focusing on today, which is
圣厌曼德迦威怒王立成大神厌念诵法。
Methods and incantations of the Holy One, the great wrathful King Yamantaka, to manifest marvelous miracles. For the purposes of this discussion, we'll call it Rites and Rituals of Yamantaka, just so I don't get tongue-tied. This is considered canonical text in Tangmi or Mizong Buddhism. It's sourced from tantric traditions translated from Sanskrit into Chinese during the Tang dynasty by the renowned Imago Vajra, Bu Kong, a South Indian Buddhist monk and translator of Buddhist texts sponsored by the Tang dynasty court. Rites and Rituals of Yamantaka, in its historical and doctrinal setting, is characterized as an esoteric Buddhist ritual manual, or Yigui, which I'm going to anachronistically call a Buddhist grimoire. The text opens essentially with Yamantaka's origins story. Here goes. The Shakyamuni Buddha surveyed the Bodhisattvas, the Devas in their pure abodes, heavenly realms, and the 8 legions of beings, the Devas, Nagas, Yaksas, Gandharvas, Asuras, Garudas, Kinnaras, and Mahoragas. The Buddha then instructed to the Bodhisattva Manjushri. Okay, on screen you're going to see the side-by-side classical Chinese and my English translation of what Shakyamuni Buddha said to the Bodhisattva Manjushri, basically the Buddha's marching orders to the Bodhisattva, and then I'm just going to paraphrase this for you. Basically, the Buddha says to the Bodhisattva of wisdom, hey, look, we're all trying so hard to show the path of enlightenment and wisdom to the many beings of this multiverse, but I'm starting to think that some of them are maybe beyond saving, at least in their current lifespan in this manifestation. So we gotta do something. You gotta do something, dude, as you are the Bodhisattva of wisdom and people just aren't wising up. Then from Manjushri arose the holy and wrathful King Yamantaka, his body mounted upon a blue water buffalo, wielding various weapons and implements, adorned with a garland and crown of skulls, and clad in a loincloth of tiger skin. The text goes on for a few more sentences to describe Yamantaka as super duper strong, super duper big, burning with the most fearsome fire and brimstone of the cosmos, his whole body ablaze with flames. Yamantaka gazes fiercely in the four directions and bellows the sacred words of the supreme root mantra. Namasamanta Buddhanam, Pratyahata Sasananam, Om Kara Kara Kuru Kuru, Mama Karyam, Banja Banja Savavinyan, Daha Daha Sava Vajravinayakan, Martaya Jivantanta Kara, Mahavirta Rupinam, Haka Paka Sarva Dustan, Mahagana Patim, Jivitanta Kara, Banda Banda Sarvagrayan, Sanmukha Sarvuja, Satkarana, Rudramanaya, Vishnumanaya, Brahmanam Deva Naikamanaya, Ma Vilamba, Ru, Mandala Madhye, Pravisaya, Samaya Manusara, Hum, 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 Svot, Svot, Swaha. And so begins the secret teachings of Yamantaka empowerment and how to initiate into this tantric system of Buddhist magic. Per the 8th century text, Rites and Rituals of Yamantaka, we receive Yamantaka's root mantra, Genben Zhen Yan, as a divine transmission. It's a dharani, or sacred words of conferred power spoken directly by Yamantaka, and it's his heart seal, an esoteric Buddhist concept we talked about in the 6-syllable mantra video. I'll link in the video description box and provide in the companion written article the Rites and Rituals of Yamantaka source text where the Wrathful King's root mantra appears. In practice, you'll notice that practitioners and Yamantaka devotees more commonly recite a shortened form or a condensed derivation of the root mantra and will often still call it the root mantra. Here's one example. Hum Yamantaka Hum, 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 Phet. Genben Zhen Yan itself means root dharani, though you'll more commonly see it translated into English as mantra. Root mantras are itself an esoteric Buddhist concept, so you do need to specify which root mantra. And of course, in this case, it's Yamantaka's root mantra. Root mantras are considered the primary or root source of a divine power. In the case of Yamantaka, for example, his root mantra is his most complete vibrational signature. Now, the origin story continues. After reciting this root mantra, Yamantaka declares, and these are some pretty gutsy statements in the presence of the Buddha, with this mantra I've proclaimed, should even the bodhisattvas in the 10 stages falter from wisdom, they can be subdued by my mantra. Even more so are these words powerful against any of the 8 legions of spirits and demons who create obstacles. Which, damn, ballsy. Why is the root mantra so important and how do you receive the empowerments of Yamantaka? Well, here's what the Grimoire, Rites and Rituals has to say.
先诵此真言满10000遍，则能作种种猛力调伏法。
Translation: To initiate, one must recite the root mantra 10,000 times. Only then will you be able to perform powerful, forceful methods of subjugation with the rites and rituals contained in the sacred text. Here's what the historical and doctrinal source text is telling us. In order for the magical spells in the grimoire to be effective when you cast them and for you to possess the powers of Yamantaka, you have to have, at the very minimum, recited the root mantra 10,000 times as your initiation into receiving empowerment. And only after you have completed the 10,000 recitations will any of your magical practices with the grimoire have any power. The premise is 10,000 recitations will effectively modify and transform your vibrational signature to be in full resonance with Yamantaka's vibrational signature, which is encoded in his root mantra. Also, per mystical theory, there is an automatic regulation principle in place, which is that this type of magic is only effective when directed at the karmically wicked. If a practitioner of Yamantaka sourced magic were to direct this power at the innocent, it would have serious karmic repercussions on the practitioner themselves. Whereas, if and when a practitioner sends it at someone who, by karmic judgment, is deemed guilty and thus wicked, it's considered the most powerful cosmic force in the universe for subduing evil. To put it lightly, it's Kuan Yin saying, okay, I've done my best here for the moment and at least for the time being. During this human or demon's current lifespan, they are beyond salvation for now. So I'm going to step aside and let Yamantaka take care of business. And then Yamantaka enters and goes, roar, up. Yep, that's the best scholarly occult philosophy explanation I've got. After the revelation of how to receive initiatory empowerment to be able to perform the fierce, forceful rites of Yamantaka, the very first spell taught in the Grimoire is one for defeating your oppressors and turning the tides of power on them. If there be a wicked enemy, person, or group who is malicious and oppressive toward one who is innocent and virtuous, cast an image of Yamantaka in gold or copper. The size of this image is at your discretion. In a consecrated chamber, construct a triangular containment and place the image of Yamantaka within this triangle. Draw a likeness of the oppressor or perpetrator or inscribe the name and bind it beneath the triangle upon which Yamantaka stands, pinned under the wrathful king's feet. Position Yamantaka and the altar so he faces north. Wear black ceremonial or ritual garments. The practitioner shall sit across from Yamantaka facing south. Form the spear mudra with your hands and recite the root mantra in a wrathful, forceful voice. Recite 3 times daily for a period of 7 days. The one who has offended shall suffer great illness, affliction, pain, and suffering, and meet their utter destruction. The spear mudra or shuoying refers to a specific type of ritual hand gesture or mudra found within esoteric Buddhism. Within the context of esoteric Buddhism, the shuo mudra is regarded as a potent and formidable hand gesture imbued with the power to destroy obstacles, provide protection, and subdue adversarial forces. So it's definitely one to learn and log in your books. You curl your left little finger, curl your left thumb over it, and press the thumb against the pinky fingernail, forming a loop. Do the same with your right pinky finger and thumb, and then connect the 2 loops together to form interlocking rings. The index, middle, and ring fingers on both hands should form a spear. In accordance with the Tuoluo Ni Ji Jing, translated to Sacred Book of Dharanis, the spear mudra is associated with invocation of the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin. Then in rites and rituals, the spear mudra is noted as one of the methods for channeling Yamantaka. And so the spear mudra has come to be a channeling and empowerment tool associated with both Kuan Yin and Yamantaka through scriptural tradition. Another mudra taught in this grimoire is the root mudra, formed by interlacing both hands inward. You then extend the 2 middle fingers straight up so the tips meet. This mudra possesses great power and efficacy, notes the text. As soon as one forms this mudra and recites the mantras herein, the practitioner shall become the embodiment of Yamantaka. Either the spear mudra or the root mudra is used in tandem with Yamantaka root mantra recitation, depending on your purpose. The spear mudra is to channel and then direct outward the powers of wrathful wisdom. And here it's worth noting the significance and implications of the spear mudra being also associated with directing out the powers of Kuan Yin, whereas the root mudra is wielded to amplify the efficacy of the root mantra recitation because it facilitates the embodiment of wrathful wisdom. The spear mudra is a weapon. It empowers you to channel Yamantaka and send his power out into the world to subjugate oppressive force. The root mudra is an amplifier that helps you to more intensely embody and become Yamantaka. A key spiritual cultivation or ritual practice tool in esoteric Buddhism is working with mandalas. You may recall this visual articulating the 4 buckets of esoteric Buddhist mystical practice. This is common across Tangmi or Mizong schools of Buddhist mystery traditions, Japanese esoteric schools, and Tibetan Vajrayana systems. Mandalas represent the solar system of a transcendental state of being, and as applicable here, Yamantaka consciousness. This becomes a spirit map for guiding your astral journeys into the cosmos of Yamantaka, which is the space or mindset where you master control of certain corresponding powers. It's cast in a square space likened to a Cartesian XY coordinate plane, where you've cast a circle, demarcated by 4 gates, guarded by 4 spirit keepers. There are then various design elements to the mandala that represent the cosmos of Yamantaka, and then at the center, a depiction of Yamantaka himself. For any specific working with Yamantaka powers, you cast a triangular coordinate system within that Cartesian plane, a ternary diagram, if you will. Mandala represents both the macrocosmic and microcosmic of a divine form. It's a bit like saying it's an anatomical diagram that maps out everything you need to know to be able to fully embody a certain divine or transcendental state of consciousness and thus channel certain divine powers. That's what I mean by microcosmic. What I mean by macrocosmic is that it also represents the universe of that divine form, and thus it's a pictorial representation of that divine form's secret, sacred teachings, knowledge, and skills. That's why mandalas are core in esoteric Buddhism, because they are the transmission instrument. The architectural design of the mandala is also the layout design for your ritual. The Grimoire describes using 5-colored powder to encircle the consecrated space. You have the 4 guardians in the 4 directions, the main deity you've invoked at the center, and the arrangement of various ritual implements, and how to perform the rites and rituals within that contained space. While details from mandala to mandala differ, the core structure remains consistent. Is this a closed practice? It is, in a manner of speaking, because until you have achieved the 10,000 recitations in the right mindset and you've attained the empowerment granted by Yamantaka, then it is not a power that can be readily or openly accessed. So a person can't just pick up a copy of the Grimoire, follow the instructions, and we'll see the full bloom of results. You need to have received the empowerment first, and the Grimoire tells you how, through those 10,000 initiatory recitations. It's a closed practice because not everyone who tries or wants will attain. Also, it's not just about the 10,000 recitations. Not just anyone is going to be a suitable vessel for containing the force of Yamantaka. You need to have the right karma, like right place, right time, compatible predisposition to harness the wrath of wisdom, because it's a very controlled, deliberate, yet intense emotion. Do you have the capacity to contain that? And are you first and foremost wise enough to become wrathful wisdom? So, in tandem with the 10,000 recitations, you need to be practicing and upholding Buddhist virtues. You start with the 6 syllable mantra practices and Kuan Yin spiritual cultivation. You want to have first mastered embodiment of Kuan Yin consciousness before you can receive Yamantaka empowerments per Mizong or esoteric Buddhist tradition. You'll often hear that the master or guru to student transmission is the only way to receive initiatory transmission or empowerments. While that is the dominant view doctrinally, like in this 8th century text, we see that it isn't the only way. In short, while this is a closed practice, in contrast to the 6 syllable mantra, which is open and accessible to any and all, what I mean by closed practice is it's restricted and self selective based on 1. Having a karmic connection to Yamantaka. 2. The capacity to be considered a consecrated vessel for containing and directing Yamantaka power. And 3. The 10,000 recitations of the root mantra. This cultivation practice will be amplified when you also engage the root mudra.
Hum Yamantaka Hum.
Avalokiteshvara Guanzhiying Pusa is expressive of a pillar of mercy, and Yamantaka Dawei De Jinggang is expressive of a pillar of severity. Buddhism, and we could say this about Taoism as well, guides us to walk the middle path. Compassion is our default setting, but within Buddhist occult frameworks, we acknowledge that some people or even entities are beyond saving in their present condition, and use of measured, justified force that must be inseparable from wisdom is how we can ensure the salvation and safety of innocence. And so also we start to intuit why this is a closed practice. To be able to hold this power within you without it corrupting you, and to have the discernment to wield it while still walking the middle path requires enlightened levels of wisdom. The 4 pillars is how we organize and study the framework of esoteric Buddhism. In other words, Buddhist magic consists of mandalas, mantras, hand mudras, and consecration or empowerment rites. Within the Buddhist magical system of Yamantaka Tantra, we've covered his mandala design, mantras, and also dharanis, the spear mudra, the root mudra, when to use which, and the initiatory empowerment rite that gains you access to this source of power. For illustrative and educational purposes only, I want to share another spell found in Rites and Rituals of Yamantaka. There's this one spell, I'm the one calling it a spell, but tell me you disagree, where you start by writing your enemy's name on a palm leaf or piece of birch bark. Press the spear mudra into the heart of the enemy's image and recite the root mantra 108 times. Then either place this leaf or bark underneath your Yamantaka statue or cast a triangular space over a mandala of Yamantaka and imprison this leaf or bark within that contained triangular space at the center of the mandala. Leave it there until the next day of Mars. This is based on the 7-day cycle observed in Buddhism, rooted in Indian or Vedic astrology. In the Chinese calendar, this would be a day when the yang fire phase is dominant. When that day of Mars or yang fire comes, perform the rite again at high noon. So that's stabbing the point of your spear mudra into the leaf or bark and reciting the root mantra 108 times, visualizing the enemy subdued by the wrath of Yamantaka, which you now embody, so it's also your wrath. Starting that evening at midnight and at midnight every time thereafter for a complete lunar cycle from that day, you're going to recite the root mantra 21 times at midnight while embodying the wrath of Yamantaka and directing that retributive force at your enemy. There's yet another spell where you mold a figurine of your enemy out of dark clay and place donkey dung inside the abdomen of this clay doll. To start the ritual, you'll need to light agar wood or benzoin incense and also provide offerings to Yamantaka in accordance with one's means. Prepare 5 wooden pegs shaped like a single-pronged vajra. Consecrate the 5 wooden pegs, which are vajra effigies, with 108 recitations of this more intermediate mantra or dharani that's given in the Grimoire. The key root syllable in that intermediate dharani is Phet, which is why you often hear the derivation Om Yamantaka Hum Phet. You then drive a vajra peg into these 5 places in the clay doll that's filled with donkey dong, left and right shoulders, 1 in each thigh, and 1 pierced through the heart. Do this while facing south. Oh, and if things get really bad and you start to feel mercy for your enemy, perform a Hu fire offering ritual to end the calamities. For an antidote Hu, you start with a mandala of Avalokiteshvara, cast a fire before it within an enclosed, contained space, and then throw offerings into the contained flames while doing 108 recitations of the 6-syllable mantra. So one hand thumbing mala prayer beads to keep count, while the other casting the offerings into the fire alternated with a one-handed spear mudra. Sesame seeds, grains, wooden tablets inscribed with well wishes or talismanic sigils, sandalwood, benzoin, or sun-dried healing herbs are go-to magical offerings of choice for this Humo. Here's a fun one, also involving a Humo fire ritual, but for slightly different purposes. Again, I am citing directly from that 8th century Buddhist grimoire, so don't come for me. I'm reporting this information for educational, illustrative purposes only, straight from a source text, because I feel like this is interesting to my nerdy witches. All right, so here it is. To break up 2 lovers or 2 thick as thieves allies, cast the fire in a triangular altar before a sacred image of Yamantaka that can be a mandala, a statue, or a religious painting. You'll need 2 leaves of lilac flower or white cedar. On each leaf, inscribe the name of one of the lovers or allies. Then place the 2 leaves back to back. Wrap them with snakeskin and bind it tightly with a cord fashioned from weasel fur. Now you need 108 of those bundles. Then the grimoire gives you a dharani to recite. Toss the bundles one by one into the fire as you recite the dharani or magical incantation invoking Yamantaka. The 2 lovers or 2 allies, says the text, will immediately come to hate each other and fall into discord. This can be used as an anti-love spell of sorts to break up an alliance or to ally countries, nations, or kingdoms. Another spell in this book, to bring down someone wicked and powerful, take 108 black bird wings, rub them with mustard oil, build that Humo fire within triangular containment and start that fire with thorns. Then burn the 108 black wings while wrathfully calling that person's name and visualizing their downfall. There's this other spell in here, one of the last ones listed in the grimoire, where you use red and white mustard seeds, historically used in tantric rites for exorcisms and repelling harmful forces, mixed with human blood and anointing oil, which you're then going to toss into a triangular fire kindled with thorny branches and bramble while reciting a wish-fulfilling mantra. My purpose for getting into the details here, apart from it being really interesting to nerdy witches, is to really show, well, I guess another side of Buddhism. Buddhist magic, Buddhist occultism is very much rooted in the history and cultural practice of this otherwise peace, love, harmony, meditative religion. For reasons I can't imagine, Institutional Buddhism ultimately disavowed these types of esoteric or occult practices, or at least you definitely see mainstream contemplative schools of Buddhism distancing itself from these more mystical occult doctrines. Nevertheless, these practices persisted and continued on in China, often rebranded as either folk magic or systems of Taoist ceremonial magic, such as in Thunder Rites. You'll see a lot of this commingling of Tang Dynasty Buddhist magical practice with Leifa Taoist Thunder Rites. Thunder Rites being an umbrella term for a subset of magical or ritual practices in Taoist mysticism. Also, at least specific to Mahayana, we need to talk about the unspoken human politics that often gets entangled.
禅宗、净土宗、天台宗、密宗。
Chan Buddhism, also known as Zen, Son, Tian, that's Japanese, Korean, and Vietnamese respectively, Pure Land Buddhism, Tiantai, also known as Tendai Buddhism, and Buddhist mysticism, often translated as secret school, expressive of the secret teachings of Buddhism. Devotees probably won't openly speak ill of other Buddhist schools, but just airing dirty laundry as an insider, there is definitely drama, and behind closed doors, there is definitely beef. With respect to Mizong, Zen Buddhism, and Pure Land Buddhism, broadly speaking, don't typically look kindly upon Mizong esoteric Buddhism, calling it woo-woo magic. It's seen as antithetical to Buddhist doctrine, whereas Mizong and Tantra practitioners would describe this as a corpus of methodologies that lead to enlightenment and liberation, and therefore is very much consistent with Buddhist doctrine. Between the 3rd and 9th centuries, Buddhist Tantra or esoteric Buddhism is systematized in Tang Dynasty China, where we find Dharani's incantations and spell recitations, Buddhist magic, if you will, integrated into state rites and rituals for the protection and prosperity of the kingdom. Yamantaka tantric rites are institutionalized in the Tang Dynasty court in the 8th century, due in large part to the works of Amago Vajra. The rites and rituals of Yamantaka text contains quite a bit of war magic, like how to bring about the downfall of a powerful enemy state, or the expulsion ritual for casting an unwanted person or persons out from your territory, or a military victory ritual to win a battle. After Amago Vajra's death, several of his disciples, such as Hui Lang and Hui Guo, transmitted his teachings abroad, namely to Tibet, though esoteric Buddhism wasn't fully systematized in Tibet until the 10th and 11th centuries, and Japan through the Japanese monk Kukai under the lineage of Hui Guo, later developed into Shingon Buddhism. In large part, you end up with Mahayana esoteric Buddhism in East Asia, namely China, Korea, and Japan, and then there's Vajrayana Tantric Buddhism in Tibet and Mongolia. And this history of Buddhism's cultural migration is most notably observed in the transmissions of Yamantaka. My purpose for posting this lecture in juxtaposition with the one on Kuan Yin and the 6-syllable mantra is also to demonstrate the tenet that people who share the same mission don't need to share the same spiritual path. There are manifold ways we approach social justice, and it's important to acknowledge and welcome the many different, possibly even contradictory approaches people on the same team can take. What isn't right for me doesn't mean it's not right. For most of you watching, hopefully this was like a fun, witchy social studies class. For some of you, leave it to me to show you the entrance to yet another rabbit hole. To sum up, for those who are familiar with my work, you know that almost everything I release and when I release it is intentional. I thought long and hard, years actually, about whether to ever put out something like this on a public platform. So the fact that after sitting on this topic for 3 years, I chose now, there must be a reason for it, right?